Which are you more inclined to do?
Seek relief from your pain even if left unable to function as fully as before.
Or,
Endure the pain long enough to recognize and redress the underlying need so you can remove the pain and get back to functioning as before.
social pressures tend to pull us into coping with the pain of our unresolved needs. It's easier to grab a fast meal of processed food than invest in preparing a quality meal. We normalize managed pain. Need response drills down to the core of your pain to restore you to full functioning, to full wellness. Can you say the same about the legal process or psychological services?
Welcome aboard to Need Response, co-hosted by me, Steph Turner.
And me, Gustavo. Need Response is a new professional service responding to your needs in ways no other option can.
Join us today as we apply this new scientific understanding of your needs to your life. Together, we
Spread more love.
In episode 4, we described 4 levels of problems you face in life. Besides personal problems, you face problems beyond your personal control. We explained how this new service of need response exists as the only professional option to address all of your problem levels. In this episode, we unpack problems as the consequence of unresolved needs. The less your needs resolve, the less you can function, and sicker and more in pain you become. The more your needs resolve, the better you can function, and the less in pain, plus the more well you will be. We address 4 different levels of functioning, your 4 levels of wellness, and we show you how easily we can slip from wellness into illness into dysfunction. Then point to need response as a way to more effectively restore our personal and shared wellness. By addressing all problem levels to remove cause for pain, need response aims to improve your wellness in a uniquely powerful way.
In your book, You Need This, you introduced the idea of symfunction. If I remember right, you describe it as a phase between being fully well and being fully unwell.
Yes, the wisdom granted to me helped me realize 4 prominent levels of our ability to function.
Function array, I believe you call it,
Yes, the functionality array to be sure,
with 4 progressing levels of functionality.
or regressing if starting with the level of highest functionality.
Peak function, right?
Yes, I'll let this clip about the functionality array take it from there.
You feel fine one day and wake up sick the next day. Our healthcare language characterizes this as some kind of binary. And oncology recognizes how we gradually slip from full wellness into sickness. Oncology recognizes how every need exists as an objective fact. Wellness only occurs when all of your needs adequately resolve. The less your needs resolve, the less well you become as you slip further down into lower levels of functioning. Lowered functioning then prompts pain to warn us of this declining wellness. And oncology recognizes how we call experience a functionality array where we go through phases of complete wellness to deadly pathology. When speaking of getting sick or being well, we easily overlook the graduations between the two. And oncology recognizes 4 key stages from full wellness to full pathology. Each stage features what gets prioritized, and then the likely results and the type of resources used to address your needs. These 4 stages from full wellness to full illness are 1. Peak functionality, 2. Symfunctionality, 3. Dysfunctionality, and 4. Misfunctionality. 1. You are peak functional when you can fully resolve all of your needs promptly. You prioritize fully resolving needs, not allowing them to linger. You live optimally. You reach your full potential. You can freely access primary resources like clean water to restore you to full functioning, to full wellness. 2. You become symfunctional when you have to settle for less than optimal options. You prioritize easing your needs. You count on others to help you get by, to live adequately. You reach some, but not all of your life's potential. You generally access mostly alternate resources like sugary drinks to restore some functioning while also limiting your wellness. 3. You slip into dysfunction when you routinely react to your painful needs with painkillers. You relieve the pain of your needs with getting what your life actually requires to function. You reach little of your life's potential. You habitually access substitute resources, like alcohol. Your needs persist unmet, prompting more pain to relieve, in a vicious, debilitating cycle. 4. You slide into misfunction when you can barely survive from all of your unresolved needs. You struggle to even function at all. Painkillers don't work like they used to. Your life's potential evades you. You cannot reliably access any resources. You sit on the premise of overwhelming misery and agonizing despair. Death awaits outside your door. Yes, that was unpleasant, but let's look up. An enchology refers to this passage into lower levels of functioning as drift. If we cannot access the nutritional foods our bodies require and settle on processed meals or junk food, we drift into a less capable level of well-being. Not that this is always our personal fault. Structural problems hinder you and I from consistently accessing the primary resources that could keep us fully well. An enchology identifies all kinds of things that cause us to drift into less wellness. They're called dysfunctions. An enchology answers these dysfunctions with what it calls refunctions. These bring you back to fuller wellness. Need response exists to restore you and I to greater wellness by identifying and resolving each of our needs. That includes spotting the dysfunctions and refunctions involved. Only need response equips you to fully resolve your needs, to remove cause for your pain, and to restore you to full wellness. Learn more about how need response can improve your wellness level by listening to the Need Response podcast.
Another word for function as used here could be wellness.
In fact, need response offers to address our wellness levels in easy-to-grasp terms. Functionality digs a little deeper into the depths of academic oncology.
Yes, I think it's best to speak of wellness rather than function. Most of us can relate more to a wellness level than the more technical term of functionality.
I appreciate that. I try to strike a fine balance between what's more relatable and what's more accurate.
The more relatable, do you feel concerned you lose some accuracy?
Yes, at the same time, I don't want to feed into this problem of symfunction. I'm trying to strike a careful balance.
Are you hoping this word in function goes viral?
Yes, I think it will help a lot to help understand why it seems everything is going so haywire. At the same time, I don't want to feed into this problem of symfunction. I'm trying to strike a careful balance.
You mean wearing down the truth to make it easier for everyone to swallow?
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Why the sin prefix?
Like the words sympathy and symphony, it conveys the idea of with others. You function adequately by relying upon others. As primary resources, like your best friend or a healthy meal, may not be readily available. You fall back on alternate resources. These let you adequately restore your ability to function, albeit at a less than optimal level.
But does not fully resolve your need, which likely leaves you in some pain, right?
Exactly, but it's usually a mild discomfort, something we all can typically cope with, especially when we have each other to lean upon, to fall back upon, to help us get by.
The sin is functional.
Precisely.
Seems like many could use this label.
I think it could catch on by those struggling to name this experience, to put a label on how we slip into lives of quiet desperation.
By naming it, perhaps we can catch it and do something about it before losing full wellness.
It sure has helped me to put a name to it. Originally I was going to label this as subfunctional.
Why did you change it?
I didn't want to imply this common state of being as automatically bad. Sometimes just reaching adequacy is okay. It's practical for the situation. It's certainly better than slipping into the misery of dysfunction.
Yeah, I can see that. Being almost sick is better than full on sickness.
Something like that. There currently is no common term that covers this identifiable phase between full wellness and full dysfunction, or illness.
And the term comes up again when you talk about. Let me think for a moment. Oh, yeah, scene function capture. Can you share what that's about?
Not like this clip can.
Then go ahead, short clip. Tell us about scene function capture.
Something happens between the time you enjoy full wellness and that moment you realize you're completely ill. There's good reason why you simply cannot bring yourself back to full wellness. Not merely physical or biological wellness, but emotional wellness too. Think of each functionality stage being subdivided into three overlapping phases: the upper phase, mid phase, and lower phase. The symfunction phase can be organized into three such steps that shows just how easy we can lose our wellness. Need response understands how you can slip through the symfunction stage and onto dysfunction from little to no fault of your own. That's one reason for looking at structural problems and for addressing power problems. If you cannot reliably access primary or even alternate resources, you cannot function well enough to ensure you faithfully resolve your needs in the future. You can find symfunction turn into a gateway to certain dysfunction. Yes, even after making all the right choices. To unpack how symfunction serves as a gateway to certain dysfunction, it helps to understand what Anenkelege calls symfunction capture. This definition includes three noticeable steps. Step 1. Symfunction creep. You go from fully resolving all of your needs to only being able to resolve some of your needs, while merely easing the rest with alternate resources. You get used to adequately getting by in a few areas. For example, you go from consistently eating healthy meals to occasionally relying on highly processed foods. As another example, you go from being able to share almost anything with your closest friend to holding back some unpleasant details and feeling a little alienated for it. That's how symfunction creep can sneak up on you. Step 2. Symfunction strain. You go from easing some of your needs to easing half of your needs. You feel less able to get all of your stuff done. Others seem to struggle like you, so you perhaps think little of it. You grow comfortable with this emerging sense of practical adequacy. You go from eating a few processed meals to mostly eating processed foods. You go from holding back a few details to canceling some of your regular time together. That's what symfunction strain can look like. Step 3. Symfunction trap. You go from easing half your needs to easing a majority of your needs. You then lack the energy to get back to resolving your needs more fully. You feel weighed down. Discomfort grows. You start trying to relieve the pain as you lack the focus to get at the source of your pain: neglected needs. You go from mainly processed foods to indulging in some junk food with deficient nutritional value. You go from canceling time with your friend to occasionally ghosting them altogether, feeling trapped in your isolation. That's why the symfunction trap can pull you down into the abyss of dysfunction. Need response can liberate you from this trap. You get back to identifying what you actually need and have not been getting. You identify any barriers, and together we dismantle those hindrances. We build a bridge to a better future for us all. How? Listen each week to the Need Response podcast to join us in exploring how. We first will focus on the symfunction capture of the adversarial legal system. We apply this specifically to the hidden problem of how adversarialism wrongly convicts the innocent. We break the mold of the oversimplistic binary of guilt or innocence. We replace it with a degree of estimated innocence by comparing the case with those already exonerated. We help to liberate the innocent from damages not of their own making. We counter the symfunction capture of the judicial system with its over-reliance upon adversarialism with one the greatest refunctions of all, the power of love.
I can think of some things where this aptly applies.
As can I.
Let's apply it now to the ongoing conflict between Palestinians and Israelis.
Yes, you could say Israel culture has slipped into a kind of mass symfunction capture.
How do you mean?
Israeli culture has slipped into a rabbit hole of victim culture.
Yeah, when I watch interviews of Israeli citizens, I hear some sound like they're trapped in some kind of victimhood. Not all, but enough to apparently sway popular support for destroying Gaza.
Their media and public reinforce the belief that everyone in the world is out to destroy them. Examples of actual anti Semitism gets easily exaggerated as the global norm.
Yes, what some call the weaponization of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, from their hyper defensiveness reactions, there's little to no reflection on how resisting the inflexible needs of others perpetuates the conflict.
I think you call this conflict porn.
Yes, those benefiting from a conflict tend to sabotage actual paths towards meaningful peace. They may speak of seeking peace, but what they really mean is to force others to acquiesce to their will.
A kind of shallow peace.
Yes, to ignore the reality that anyone kept from resolving their needs may resort to desperate acts to address their inflexible needs.
Like the need for security and for self determination.
Yes, as stated in a previous episode, both Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews experience the inflexible need for security and for self determination.
And some Palestinians may resort to acts of asymmetrical warfare, characterized as terrorism.
Just as the early Israelis did about a century ago when they were the outgunned minority in the land.
Before Israel became a state.
Yes, back then, Jewish militia resorted to asymmetrical warfare against the British Mandate and against the Arabs, and even against some of the Jews who were already living there.
Some people's militia or freedom fighters is another people's terrorists.
Well put. Symfunction capture congeals around such adversarialism, where everyone is expected to take sides against each other.
When busy fighting each other, they lose focus on addressing the inflexible needs fueling the conflict.
Yes, they do. They slip into what can be called a victimhood mindset.
Victimhood mindset.
Yes, I recently read about this online in an article from Scientific American. It describes Israeli culture as captured by a sense of victimhood, by a shared victimhood mindset.
Maybe we could add the link in the description.
Good idea.
I can see how the trauma from the Holocaust and past programs could trap them in fear.
Despite the decline of outright anti Semitism since the end of the Holocaust 80 years ago, many Israelis identify themselves as part of a victimized group. To them, every Palestinian is a suspect anti Semite out to destroy them.
But Jews around the world could still have cause to fear a return of this past hatred towards them.
Yet this article makes an important distinction. Those who suffer trauma do not always slip into a victimhood mindset. And those who slip into a victimhood mindset do not always suffer from direct trauma themselves.
Like many Israelis.
Exactly. They live in a bubble feeling surrounded on all sides by people who they perceive as seeking to end their existence. They even dread pro-Israel folks who dare raise questions about their colonial expansionism in the West Bank and beyond.
Because they equate the slightest criticism of Zionist ideology with anti Semitism, I can see how that points to a collectivist mindset.
The article identifies four components of a victimhood mindset. 1. Constantly seeking recognition of one's victimhood. 2. A sense of moral elitism. 3. Lack of empathy for the pain and suffering of others. 4. Frequently ruminating about past victimization.
Without even reading that article, I can sense how each of these apply.
Let's start with that first element, constantly seeking recognition for their victimhood.
If they are the true victims, then the inflexible needs of Palestinians don't count for much.
Yep, Israelis often assert their right for security and self-determination at the expense of Palestinians' need for security and self-determination.
Like when they say Israel has a right to defend itself.
Yes, We would never say America has a right to defend itself.
No.
The founding document of the United States, the Declaration of Independence, saves that right for the people, not its government.
Ah, yes.
And it further states how governments are constituted to serve that right, not to serve itself at the expense of the people. But I think most of us Americans have forgotten this distinction.
I never thought of it like that. So Israel identifies itself more on a collective level than the US culture.
Yes, it helps to realize how the State of Israel began as a socialist project.
Socialist?
Yes, its first prime minister, Ben Gurion, was a socialist. So I think this collective mindset is burned into the DNA of Israeli identity.
So whatever a Hamas gunman does to one Israeli, he does it to all Israelis.
Yes, this gets to that moral elitism element.
I hear their moral elitism when characterize the IDF as the most moral army in the world, because they try to notify their targets before bombing them.
A low moral bar indeed, so emboldened that they are morally superior that they upload their war crime videos onto TikTok.
It's easier to claim moral superiority when objectifying the other side as morally inferior, much as the Nazis did to the Jews.
Hamas represents to Israel the morally inferior outsider, the ultimate enemy.
Indeed, all Arabs are viewed as outsiders.
And increasingly, non Zionist Jews outside of Israel get put on the pecking order as suspiciously against the collective identity of Israelis.
First, they came for the Gazans, but I did not speak up as I was not a Gazan.
Yes, I think that Pastor Niemöller poem from the 1940s Germany aptly applies here.
Yes, it does.
That speaks to the third element of that American Science article, the one about lacking empathy for the pain and suffering of others.
I've heard non-Zionist Jews express empathy for Palestinians, but I rarely, if ever, hear any such empathy from Israelis themselves.
Those who do likely get pressured to stay silent, to not talk to media, or get shadow banned.
Shadow ban?
Their social media posts empathizing with the plight of Palestinians do not get displayed to those expressing hostility toward Palestinians. That's how I understand social media algorithms work.
I also see this lack of empathy when failing to mention how Palestinians resist colonialism of Israeli settlements, which are against international law.
Yes, and they will tell you that the UN and other such international bodies are anti Semitic.
So you can be empathetic with them, even if they will not be empathetic with you.
Yes, plenty of double standards abound.
Yet they will claim the United Nations holds a double standard.
How do you mean?
I hear Zionists claim how the UN and other international bodies hold Israel to a different standard than other countries. Is that fact based or just more spin?
I suspect they believe their own spin, their own propaganda. They present moral elitism when accusing Hamas or anyone else resisting their expansionist agenda as being terrorists, when they themselves indulge in more violent acts of terrorism by targeting innocent Palestinian children.
If they suspect any Palestinian Arab could hurt them again with another October 7th surprise, I can understand why Israelis would want to hurt them first.
Yeah, I too can appreciate their obsessive dread of terrorism and how it seems to blind them from their own acts of terrorism against Palestinians.
I'm not excusing Israelis' hyper defensive reactions. I'm just trying to see it from their point of view.
Good. I see their whole society slipping down the rabbit hole of symfunction capture. They cannot seem to recognize how their over-defensive actions provoke the over-defensive actions of others.
A vicious cycle of counter-violence, feeding upon itself.
Yes, their symfunction capture spurs them to accuse Hamas of committing terrible acts of violence which they themselves commit, apparently out of revenge for some stuff that never actually happened.
Like that debunked narrative of sexual violence and babies being found in ovens or beheaded.
Yes. So now the IDF feels entitled to revenge these imagined atrocities by doing much the same, or worse, as they wholeheartedly believe these debunked horrors of October 7th.
It's like they obsess over past hurts, which I don't want to dismiss, because I know it all hurt these Israelis deeply. But it seems they magnify their pain to rationalize their violent reactions to it.
Let's admit how Israelis collectively ruminate about past victimization.
That fourth and last element in the American Science article.
Yes, they exist in a bubble that interprets Arab resistance to Western colonialism as specifically targeting them for being Jewish.
Even as many Arabs resist Western colonialism from non Jews.
Yes, their fever pitched cry against anti Semitism, or their expansionist definition of anti Semitism, tries to smear all non Zionist Jews as self loathing, simply for not being expansionist Zionists like them.
You mean expanding not only to the West Bank and Gaza, but also expanding their definitions to gaslight the world into accepting it all?
That's one way to put it. I mean, can these secular Zionist Jews who denounce Orthodox Jews for not being Zionists at all, can that be somehow interpreted as a kind of anti Semitism?
I never thought about that. But I can see how this all illustrates what function capture looks like on societal level.
Yes, in a nutshell, both Israelis and Palestinians find themselves trapped in declining levels of wellness from being trapped in a cycle of mutual defensiveness that avoids resolving inflexible needs.
Stuck in a culture of function capture.
And worse, of dysfunction and spiraling down into misfunction.
Right, I see that. IDF soldiers killing Gazan children, committing social suicide in the process.
Yes, I think that encapsulates this well. Using violence to settle a conflict has a way of making things far worse. Fear abounds instead of cultivating love. And those trapped in a conflict can hardly see their life's wasted potential.
An eye for an eye make the whole world go blind.
Well put. Adversarialism of opposing inflexible needs easily blinds us from how our supposed solution actually feeds the familiar problem.
Then elites swoop in with the supposed answers, but their answers risk trapping us further in cycles of function capture.
Both political adversarialism and judicial adversarialism routinely fail to address inflexible needs. Need response exists to fill that unacceptable gap.
Yes, neither response can counter adversarialism with its mutuality alternative. To incentivize all those in a conflict to first affirm each other's inflexible needs they never chose to have.
Only then can we collectively heal from symfunction capture, as we replace defensive provoking adversarialism with more understanding and love, to restore our life's squandered potential to live life more fully.
If I must take a side, I take the side of everyone's inflexible needs be addressed and eventually resolved. Then we can know peace.
I'm with you. My analysis of Israeli culture steers clear of the adversarialism of indulgently taking sides, since it never makes principled sense to oppose anyone's inflexible needs.
Yes, everyone has an inflexible need for security and for self determination.
Right. Resisting such inflexible needs always sparks conflict. Opposing what others cannot change automatically provokes them to dig in their heels, to get defensive, and sometimes even violent towards each other.
So the Middle East conflict is not as complicated as talking heads claim?
From an ontological perspective, it boils down to how each side disrespects the inflexible needs of the other, and how this fuels the conflict. and never results in a lasting peace.
Yeah, I can see that. When anyone opposes my basic needs, I cannot simply let it go.
And you shouldn't, lest you too slip into some function capture and risk sliding into pain filled dysfunction.
Yeah, I can see that. When anyone opposes my basic needs, I cannot simply let it go.
So now let's apply some function capture to the problem of wrongful convictions.
I hear that's a huge problem for the United States, which incredibly holds the world's largest prison population.
Yes, it does. And not because we Americans are uniquely violent toward each other, but more likely because we too have collectively slipped into some function capture.
Yes, it becomes harder to not break any law when your capacity collapses from not being fully able to resolve all your needs.
That's true, but I'm thinking how some function capture can help explain the mass problem of wrongly convicting so many innocent people.
Like when the falsely accused can't fully resolve their needs for justice, as they get stuck defending themselves, then slips into the stereotype of felons always in denial.
Yes, that's one application. I was actually thinking of applying this to the suboptimal functionality of the adversarial judicial process itself.
Ah, yes, linking function capture to structural problems, which we talked about last time.
Right. As we grow accustomed to our needs not getting fully resolved, we slip into widely accepted social norms that keep us from fully relating and resolving one another's needs.
So, are you saying that the adversarial approach stems, at least in some way, from these norms of settling for less than optimal results?
I'm saying that pitting the accuser and accused against each other without ever addressing each other's affected needs easily traps both sides into declining levels of wellness.
Then they slip into function capture, which likely feeds the judicial system with more bodies to feed upon, if I can put it that way.
I do. It reminds me of that famous Twilight episode called To Serve Man.
I don't think I ever seen it.
Aliens come to Earth to promise them peace, and they do deliver on that pledge for a while. They bring a book, and a cryptographer translates its title as To Serve Man.
Ah, yes. Just as the judicial system promised to keep the public safe, and apparently it does, until it targets the wrong person, like it did with you.
Yes, but the ulterior motive of these apparently benevolent aliens is to round up these gullible humans and take them back to their luxurious home world.
As an act of benevolent kindness.
At first it seems that way, then it's revealed it's actually a kind of sick harvest.
Oh,
That cryptographer finally translates the book and then warns those boarding the alien ship, don't get on that ship. The rest of the book, To Serve Man, it's a cookbook.
oh, not to serve the needs of humans, but use humans to serve their own appetite.
I see this as a metaphor for the alienating impersonal judicial system.
Ah, yes, the promise to serve, but actually serving itself at the expense of our inflexible needs.
Exactly. Does the judicial system exist to serve our justice needs? Or does it serve up you and I to serve its own institutional needs?
Prosecutors can serve the public with good intent, but still can get some things terribly wrong.
Part of the inspiration for recognizing symfunction creep goes back to my days in college and learning about mission creep.
Mission creep?
Sociology has long recognized a common pattern that many public organizations and institutions go through.
Mm-hmm.
They start out serving the public with a specific purpose,
Yes?
but after a while, they drift from prioritizing the founding purpose, their original mission, to ensuring its own continuance, its own survival.
And this lies from its original purpose. It relates to function capture.
Yes, just as that Scientific American article about a victimhood mindset aptly applies to Israeli Zionist culture, It can also apply to the mindset of prosecutors.
Oh, how so?
Well, let's go over each of those four elements.
Okay,
First, constantly seeking recognition for one's apparent victimhood. I add apparent because sometimes no crime or offensive actions occurred, as was my situation. Some prosecutors insist they are serving crime victims when honestly they are serving their careers at the expense of accusers.
reminds me of how Netanyahu uses the Israeli hostage crisis to serve his own political aims.
Second, a sense of moral elitism, of insisting their interpretation and application of law should rule supreme. They resist viable claims of innocence from people like me. One of the reasons for starting the new service of need response is to counterbalance the law supremacy or legalism of the adversarial judicial process. And prosecutors play an oversized role in that process.
No one is above the law, but as one of the ecology principles declare, no law is above the inflexible needs those flexible laws must be able to serve.
Third, lack of empathy for the pain and suffering of others. Not only the prosecutor's apathy toward the wrongly convicted innocent and their families, but also turning a blind eye to victims. Think of the survivor of a violent crime who can never be certain that they identified the right person and carries with them the burning guilt of helping to put in prison an innocent person. You would think an empathetic prosecutor would be at top of this, but that's rarely the case, especially for prosecutors incentivized to focus more on their high rate of convictions than the actual needs of the people.
That sounds like a power problem, rooted more in a structural problem.
It is. This critique goes especially for the overzealous prosecutor who falsely charges a grieving mother with shaken baby syndrome when compelling evidence points to an undiagnosed medical condition as what actually cost the baby's life.
Wow,
Or the father who loses his three daughters in a house fire and gets dubiously accused and convicted of arson and of murdering his own children, then put on death row for a dozen years until he is executed in 2004. First, he has to grieve the loss of his own beloved children. Then he has to grieve the loss of his own freedom and good name. Finally, he must grieve the loss of his own life because the prosecutor appears more concerned with upholding this dubious conviction than to serve either the public's interest for actual justice or to respect the inflexible needs of all those involved.
when and where did this occur?
The fire happened in late 1991, and the man, Cameron Todd Willingham, was executed in Texas back in 2004. Netflix recently featured a story about him called Trial by Fire. It's hard to find anyone who's looked into this case and not come out thinking that the state of Texas likely killed an innocent man.
And there are more cases of wrongful execution.
Yes, unfortunately, the Willingham case represents a clear indication of an overzealous prosecutor. This prosecutor perhaps was trying to serve justice for those three young girls who lost their lives in that fire, which speaks to the fourth element, frequently ruminating about past victimization.
Yes, let's get back to how a prosecutor can slip into symfunction capture, along those four elements of victim mindset.
If your job is to repeatedly interview crime victims and do all you can to punish the offender, you can start to become a hammer that sees every suspect as a nail. You might pound a few innocent people into dust.
Yes, I can see how that could pull the prosecutor's attention away from realizing a case is weak, and perhaps they have the wrong person.
As in my case, no crime occurred at all.
How does neither response offer an applicable solution to all of this?
First, we unpack a structural problem at the core of the adversarial judicial process. We identify how wrongful convictions of the innocent and the not so innocent can be traced to the dysfunction of what Anakelji identifies as toxic legalism.
Toxic legalism.
Yes, toxic legalism, where we put more emphasis on flexible laws than the inflexible needs that we trust our laws to serve.
And you're saying that the adversarial justice system serves law at the expense of our inflexible needs?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Within the dysfunction of toxic legalism is the problem of adversarial supremacy.
You mean how the adversarial judicial system automatically pits people against each other?
Precisely, the rise of symfunction capture appears to correlate with increasing reliance upon laws, upon norms.
Sure, as each person's ability to function steadily declines, I can see why many fall back on impersonal rules.
Right, you then don't have to think so much, just follow the rules.
As their needs no longer resolve, at least not fully, their pain level increases.
Right,
They then become more self absorbed as their pain consumes more and more of their shrinking focus.
yep, which plants the seeds for toxic legalism.
Putting personal laws over personal needs.
Exactly. We'll discuss this problem of toxic legalism more in the next episode.
Good, I look forward to it.
I suspect someone out there really needs to hear this. You can let them know of these fresh insights into their experience of needs. Leave a helpful review, share it with others, and remind them to share it with others. Let's spread this inspiration to improve all of our lives with the amazing power of contagious love.
Stay tuned every other week to follow how you build this much needed service.
Subscribe if you haven't already to be sure you do not miss any opportunity to help each other improve all of our lives.
Next time, we identify and unpack a pervasive problem facing us all: toxic legalism.
We offer to solve this problem with the unique tools of need response.
Tune in to learn exactly how.
See you there.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Need Response. We look forward to serving you next time, bringing you more insights and inspiration into serving your needs. Subscribe to Need Response wherever you get your podcasts. A new episode is ready for you every other Wednesday morning. Until then, let's spread some love.